All right, Venus is now in Leo. We're going to have Mercury making its way into its own sign of Virgo, and Saturn is backtracking all the way into Pisces until next year. We are entering into eclipse season now, y'all, so things are about to get even more dramatic and a bit more weird, as we are being called to speak from our hearts. Otherwise, power will try and speak for us, and we already know what that's done for us as a collective. So this is a time about us examining our relationship to ourselves and one another and where we place our faith in. And I say that because the nodes are being activated starting next week with eclipse seasons, first with that full moon in Pisces, and then later on with that second new moon in Virgo. So it's a time in which we have to ask ourselves who and what we have faith in and why, and where we are giving our authority up to. This is an ongoing conversation, an ongoing story, especially as those outer planets are all now in a conversation and will all be retrograde starting next week. So this is the weekly forecast for August 27th through September 2nd. Saturn goes retrograde in Pisces time. All right, so let's get into it, y'all. Welcome back to Yapping with the Stars, the show where I talk about life and spirit with the help of the planets, stars, and zodiacs, and a little bit of common sense thrown in there as well. Now, I am your host and guide, Nicole Rouse, a storyteller who comes from a line of storytellers who weave and tell stories in many different ways. And here I work with astrology and ethnography to explore the stories of what it means for us to be human. Because right now, the present is up for grabs. So who is leading the stories that will bring us into our futures? Now, every Wednesday, we check into the chaos we call society and ask two pressing questions. What's the cosmos showing us this week? And where are we being called to move, create, burn, build, or reflect upon? And we are in reflection time, y'all. A lot of retrogrades are happening along with inner planets moving into signs in which they can start to have some shine. All right. Now, before we get into the weekly forecast, let's do a couple of reminders. If you are listening to the show on YouTube, please go ahead and like and subscribe and share. That really does help push the videos into this YouTube algorithm. And I swear all I've been doing is a lot of us do, right, is try to figure out these algorithms on these different platforms. And so for here, the like, shares, and subscribes actually do help. So I really do appreciate that. And if you are listening to this show on Spotify, your comments and your likes are also really helpful as well. And so I do appreciate those. Thank you very much. But if you're interested in listening to the full episode, so what I have available for online for free is the weekly breakdown for each week. But then when we go more into Astrology 101 and more analysis in the Yapping section, that is on my Patreon. So please consider subscribing there. Tiers start as low as $5 a month. And in that way, I am also getting an exchange that will help me be able to keep exchanging out and creating. And right now, y'all, we really have to rethink the ways in which we engage with creation and creators. We have been taught really well through these various social media platforms over the past decade or so that it is okay just to extract from people and not expect to give anything back, thinking that just watching is somehow feeding those who are creating out in the public. But we now know that's not exactly true. And as these algorithms change and as they constantly shift the ability to even be able to monetize, we have to then reassess our relationship to and with these platforms and with creation and creators themselves. And this is another way in which we can really start to tap into our humanity once again, because we all have the ability to create, y'all. It's just some are more expressive and the public than others. But we have to think about, if you were creating in general, what would it look like for you to feel as if you were also being fed, and being fed both physically, right? Because our bodies do need food, but also spiritually and mentally. Okay. So that's something I want folks to kind of all of us think about as we move forward in these kind of technological and algorithmic streets, because like I've always said, the biggest commodity besides the body is attention, right? Attention, the body, and data. all of it kind of sits together. And so in order for us to be embodied, part of that embodiment is taking our attention back. So if you want to kind of dive more with me and exchange with me, check out my Patreon, y'all. I got some fun stuff there. And right now we're actually reading, we just finished up reading Ring Shout. And it's part of an ongoing kind of experiment that I'm doing in the Patreon, because it's part of my Embodied Futures Lab, in which we're playing with stories and storytelling as a way for folks to learn how to rewrite their own stories. And right now we are looking at the relationship between gods, humans, and monsters as a way for us to understand how all three of those kind of archetypes reside within us. And previously, last month, we read N.K. Jemisin's The 100,000 Kingdoms to start off this kind of storytelling journey. And then for the next 2 months, we're going to be reading books 2 and 3 of that series from N.K. Jemisin. So for that and a lot more divination study sessions, play dates with curiosity and the like, check out the Patreon, y'all. Having a good time over there. And also, if you're interested in working one-on-one with me, I do offer astrology readings, and I've just revamped my website so it makes my astrology services a bit clearer. So go ahead over there. If you use the code birthday till the end of August to book, then there's $44 off any astrology reading, and you can book the reading through September. And to celebrate my birthday, it's now past. I am officially into my 9th house year. And so I wanted to get some clarity about and making sure it's clear about what services I do offer. And I actually, thinking about that, just added a new reading, 30-minute reading called the Clarity Reading. And basically you get to ask a question. If you are wanting guidance from the cosmos and somebody who reads the stars in a particular way, then go ahead and look at that reading. It's 30 minutes. I believe it's 150, and it gives you a chance to learn how I read, but also dive deep into your chart for a particular inquiry, okay? So go ahead and check that out there. And then for more of my work and future projects, check out my website, drnicolerouse.com. I'm going to start talking about this more next week, but I am working on a documentary called Queering Chaos, and I have a small residency at Dorothy Downstairs in Chicago starting in October, in which I'll be hosting once a month Queering Chaos conversations based on different topics. And the documentary's focus is on what does it mean and how do we look to queer communities who are maintaining their queerness in a time of chaos. So what does it look like to queer chaos when we are being told to conform to it? So I'll have more information about that, but it really does align with kind of the astrological story unfolding in the stars that we've been talking about over the past few months and moving forward. Because if we don't take back our stories, if we don't take back our bodies, then we do become vessels. We do become open kind of cadavers, essentially, for another spirit to come in and use us. And that really is the embodiment of the colonial project. So when we look to the stars, y'all, again, I use astrology as a different logic and combine it with the disciplinary training I've had as an anthropologist to have us really examine the question of what does it mean to be human. And when we examine that question, it takes us on all different kinds of routes and roads. But when we look at it through the kind of present day, we have been forced to constrict and confine the concept of the human to fit the power structures that be, but now the power structures are crumbling, right? The infrastructure, the floor is no more. It was always a facade. It was always kind of this slippery emperor has no clothes type of construction conjure, that now that the veil has been lifted, we have the ability to remake it. Does it mean it's going to be easy? No. We have to remind ourselves that it is possible, that there are different ways, that there are different timelines, that there are different systems out there. We just have to not only remember, but in remembering, we also have to create. So it's this kind of relationship between past and future that can only happen when we are fully present. All right. And this is really part of the conversation that the stars are having with us this week. So let's get into the weekly forecast, y'all. Okay. Now let's backtrack for a minute because while we go Wednesday to Wednesday here, on Monday the 25th, Venus did move into Leo. Now, I talked about this at the very end of last week's episode, and I want to kind of reintroduce this because this is actually a really important type of introduction into the various kind of transits occurring this week, right? So when Venus went into Leo on Monday the 25th, it formed an immediate opposition to Pluto retrograde in Aquarius, okay? But it was also in an immediate trine to Saturn and Neptune that are both retrograde in Aries. Now, Venus in Leo season will be asking us to stand up for our beliefs when it comes to relationships and justice, y'all, okay? We got to figure out where not only our heart lies, but what we are willing again to go to battle for. Now, Leo has been in a loud conversation with us for a while. Mercury being there, going retrograde. When the sun went in there, it automatically squared again Saturn as well. The sun is now squaring Uranus, so our sense of selves are being challenged at a structural level, being challenged at a collective level, right? And we are going to, anytime we have planets going through Leo, it will be in an opposition in some point in time with Pluto. So Leo really has been a catalyst for us having to examine our personal relationships, our heart, our sense of self, right? Our pride, our ego in relationship to various structures in society, because all the outer planets have been in a conversation with these various transits in Leo. Venus is no exception, right? So this is really about then, what do we love? What do we love and what are we going to go to battle for? Because Venus is still a warrior. Remember when I talked about a few months ago when Venus was in Aries, it bends things. So Venus in Aries bends concepts of gender, of justice, of money and the like. But it's a warrior because it's going to war. So when you put Venus in these these fire signs, she's ready to stand up for whatever it is that she believes in. And I'm saying that too because Mars is in Libra. So Mars is the planet of action, of war, but it is in the sign of Venus, of compromise, of relationships, of balance, right? Of justice. So with Mars in Libra, people keep talking about, again, like people have said that that's in fall, and that tends to be, again, a part of passive aggressiveness and things can't get done. But as I said before, what has force really done for us when it comes to strategy and war? Has that helped the collective, or has it maintained the power structure that has manipulated understandings of compromise so that it must always be through violent means? Otherwise, it is seen as somehow docile and weak. Well, Mars is in Libra, Venus is in Leo. So the Venus rule sign that is over our actions is asking us to reevaluate what balance truly looks like in practice, okay? So where do we compromise, and who and what sense of justice does that serve? I actually think that's a really good, important question right now, right? We have the U.S. president trying to deploy troops in various U.S. cities after taking over D.C., and he's threatening Chicago and plans on deploying troops, I think, as of, I'm recording this on the 26th. So I think as of today, he's threatening to send these troops out, right, to take over as a way to maintain, quote unquote, law and order. So this is a screwed sense of justice, right, that is not being met with acceptance by those in charge of these cities and states. So this idea of a quote unquote compromise, right? Those in charge and the people on the ground are now pushing back. So this is a classic thing of Venus and Leo. What are you willing to fight for? Because Mars in Libra, the manipulation, right? The manipulation of compromise, because that Mars in Libra is still, even though it's not under direct opposition, it is still facing off with Saturn and Neptune in Aries. So there is a face-off. There is a face-off about what it means to be in a kind of standstill with the power structure that is trying to take us back into a time in which there was no ability, right, for folks to truly push back because it was straight up top down. But now we are in a present day in which we have different ways we can engage. So what does it look like to push back? Push back in a surveillance and authoritarian state. Okay. Because Uranus is in a square because again, right now we also have Uranus square the sun for a little bit as well. And so all of these squares, right, again, are challenging us. We are being challenged individually and collectively. What are we willing to change as well? Because change is here. Right? So we're being asked to embody our self and sense of self differently in how we engage with the logic of what makes sense in the present moment. Okay. Again, Uranus is in a conversation with the other outer planets. So Uranus being the higher octave again of Mercury. So what this is doing, right? Our sense of self is our sense of self, how we are critical and why, and how that then influences our understandings of service, health, and the overall logics we work with is undergoing a change, right? This is really about our collective health as well, y'all. A major change that is being influenced by and is influencing the ways the collective are having to review who our leaders are and the stories they rely upon to maintain their power. And we are in a battle of authority right now. Who is going to lead? We're already talking about the next presidential election in 3 years. We've got all these conversations about Gavin Newsom, about Pritzker. My thing is, I live in Illinois. I live in Chicago. I need Pritzker to keep his ass here because who wants to be the next president of a failing state? Right. The next president will be the last president. And that's not trying to be gloom and doom or anything like that. That's inevitability. The state has fallen. The state has fallen, y'all. Right. We really have. And now we're being pushed to have this need for AI as the so-called future, but it's at the expense of the collective's overall well-being. So health, collective health, individual health, right, are the logics that we are using to understand what is logical for us going forward. All of that is under review. And Venus in Leo is saying then our heart is more important than now. What do we know to be true? This is about embodiment. So Venus moving into Leo is an interesting transit at this particular time because of what else is going on. A lot of astrologers are talking about how this is going to be so great for fixed signs and bringing your money in and, being loved in the public. I'm not going to necessarily discount that, but we got to put that in context, y'all. We got to put that in some context. Even what that looks like, I think, is going to express itself a bit differently because of the ways the outer planets are having us review what we bought into and how then that kind of awakening is needed for us to move then where we place our heart, therefore where we place our energy, where we place our love, where we place our devotion to, okay? Because on the 27th, then let's get to this week. Venus is in a direct opposition to Pluto. So again, we have a face-off of the planet of love, relationships of justice, facing off with the planet of the underworld, the planet of death and rebirth, the planet of power, the planet of banking and banking systems. Venus rules money. Pluto rules the structures of banking in a society, and it's an Aquarius. There's a pouring out of what we need collectively when it comes to resource sharing. So in this opposition, y'all, and at the same time, the moon is going to be in Libra and it will be opposing Chiron that's retrograde in Aries. And then we're going to get Jupiter in Cancer in this trine to Lilith in Scorpio. So what does all this mean, right? Can we face our pain around belief systems that have left us fending for ourselves while also claiming to be loving of the self? We have to face our relationship to money. We have to face our relationships to money, to compromise, and to the ways that our sense of self has been placed and devalued because of the way it's been placed upon how we make money. Okay, the structure is crumbling, right? There is a way that our relationship to commerce, our relationship to economics directly ties to our relationship to ourselves and how we see one another. And so Jupiter in Cancer, remember when I talked about a few months ago, is going to be expanding where we and how we understand care, because Cancer is about care. It's the moon, right? It's the emotional and physical body, alongside the ways in which we need nurturing and care. It is the mothering, it is the mothers, it is the land and shore, what we need to connect ourselves to where we come from. So it's also where we can meet our ancestors in one way, shape, or form, because we have to meet our past, meet who begot us to be present, so that we think about the legacies that we're creating in the future. Okay. So all of that is kind of Cancer energy, and Jupiter's expanding that. Jupiter will be expanding that, like I said, for a good year. And so while, again, we were told that it's going to be this big expansion and this big, benefits and, all raining down gold and myrrh and all this shit, in actuality, again, anything going into Cancer right now will have to square off with Saturn and Neptune for a while in one way, shape, or form. So there's a tension here. There's a reality check here. Saturn rules time. So what is the reality check we have been having about our relationship to all the Cancerian things? And in a trine to Lilith and Scorpio, there is a way that we are having to really come into a different knowing about what family is, what care is, what nurturing is. This is the dark femme, the dark feminine, but don't take that in this kind of pop culture way. Take that in the primal way. Take that in the primordial way. Take that in the primordial in you. What if you let your wild out? What if you let the things that you hide in you because it's not quote unquote acceptable to society, but society ain't acceptable to us, and then why are we beholden to it? So we are in this kind of conversation right now, and I want you to reflect upon the house that Cancer rules for you, okay, as a way for you to see in what area of your life those Cancerian themes, right, have been expanded, to ask you, are you receiving, and can you also be giving that kind of care and nurturing in that house, okay? Right now, on the 27th, what we are having to do is really start to face the fact that if we cannot feed ourselves, then how can we feed collectives? Then how can we create the societies say we want? So there's some real kind of reality checks here about where our real wealth lies. Our real wealth lies in family, in connection, in connecting to one another, which is a very basic primal thing of humans to begin with. Okay, so can we face the pain around the ways in which these systems have denied us that and transmuted into a source of healing? Now, healing is a big theme here, y'all, because of the South Node in Virgo. Virgo has been loud for a while. In last episode, I talked more about Virgo in the Astrology 101. Remember, Virgo is on the axis of service and surrender, and it's also on this axis of health, right? Virgo is the body. It's the mercurial, feminine, earth version of the planet of communication itself. So it is the ways that our body talks to us. And we can only hear and understand our bodies if we are healthy, if we are in connection with the body, if the health of the body is one that can be understood. All right. And so when we are talking about how we heal the self, because Chiron is retrograde in Aries, Aries being the self, being the body, being the head, there is a conversation happening around facing our wombs of self, facing the self, looking at the things that have most hurt us so that we are not leading with those triggers, but we're actually transmuting it, because collectively we are all being asked to release the ways that we have been so critical to ourselves, how we have used logics that are not logical but have kept us confined, so that we are trying to create this so-called law and order that is really ruling us, but not allowing us to fully believe ourselves, right? So again, this ongoing conversation about truth and faith And the human is really loud right now. And so I want you to track this, y'all. Like I said last week, ritual is really important right now. The ability to become devoted to the body versus disciplining it. So what does devotion look like? Venus in Leo is saying, baby, you got to also be devoted to you. You got to beautify you. Ain't nothing wrong with pretty shit. Ain't nothing wrong with nice shit. Doesn't necessarily mean it has to be expensive. Doesn't mean that it has to somehow make somebody else feel inferior. Let's not use a binary in this understanding, right? Let us really sit in the kind of gray, the kind of everyday of what it means to have and be and perform culture through beautification of you, right? Devotion to you, care of you. I was in so many justice spaces, y'all, for so long, in which they had these beautiful dreams of these kind of utopian futures in which people could be in themselves and children could play, and there's laughter in the air and food cooking and everyone is taken care of. But in the present day, everyone was beaten down, bodies a mess, mind all over the place. And there was this idea that one could not rest, one could not take care of the body because the work was so important. But if we don't stop in the present and actually care for the self, then how the hell can we even teach those who are coming after us that that is the most important thing, so that we maintain, right, these so-called new futures we say we want? So this is a practice what you preach time. Practice what you preach. Become devoted to you, devoted to the body, so the body can turn on, so you can understand what it actually needs, wants, and desires. That's a way you move differently in an authoritarian state. All right. Now, on the 28th of Mercury, so on the 28th, excuse me, Mercury is making a trine to Chiron in Aries and a square to Lilith in Scorpio. So now we've got the planet of communication toward the last degrees of Leo, now in a conversation with Chiron in Aries. So we are being asked, right, to speak truths to ourselves and one another out loud, right? Speak your truth and allow it to heal your relationship to yourself and your wild, right? That primordial in you. I talked about that last week. It's time to get wild, right? This means your words carry fire, and fire can burn, clear, and clarify, as I always say, or it can destroy, right? So how are you working with your fire? How are you allowing it to burn up what needs to be burnt up so that you can rewrite the story of you, right? So with Lilith and Scorpio, it is carrying this energy of deep truth via taboo things in life, right? Because society has made anything that is considered feminine, that is not demure, a problem. This is the construction of kind of white womanhood that is needed in order to maintain white patriarchy, right? Capitalist patriarchy. So these kind of identities, these kind of scripts, right? We are being asked to rewrite them. And so the ones who do not bend the knee to power, right? The ones who can allow themselves to rewrite their own scripts are really embodying this Lilith and Scorpio energy that is saying that if you get to the depths of something and you believe the depths, then it is up to us to remake and rewrite this shit. So on the 28th, coming off the 27th, Mercury is giving us that fire, right, of the mouth, because Venus in Leo is giving us that fire in the body. Now, on the 29th, Mercury is in Leo is now going to square the moon in Scorpio that is going to be conjunct Lilith. And that is going to be in a trine to Chiron and Aries. So we're continuing this conversation, okay? So Mercury, because it moves so quick, and from the 28th, it's making this trine to Chiron. Now by the 29th, it's going to be in a square, because the moon will now be conjunct Lilith, okay, in Scorpio. So with the moon joining the conversation, allow your emotions to erupt from the depths of your being and talk with them. I do mean that, y'all. You should be feeling emotional. There should be some emotions coming up. There should be some rumbling, some grumbling, some things that need to come out. So, one way to think about ritual in this time and how we work with ritual as a way to become devoted to the self is that ritual can help us understand what the self is saying. So, as this week goes on and you are feeling the emotions, you are feeling the irritation, you are feeling a need to speak, right? I want you to allow the emotions that want to come up from the depths of you to sit at the table with you. So, make a table. Actually, make a table, okay? And make it pretty and bring your emotions to it. You can do this in a meditation. You can physically set it up so that you're sitting there and then go into kind of a daydream or meditation. And so, say in this time, you've got anger coming up, but you've also got grief and you've also got irritation. Those are emotions that I'm sure many people have. Invite them to the table. In the dream, invite them to the table. Again, have them as different avatars. And I think I've given this kind of type of exercise before. Ask them to speak to you the truths that can help you understand yourself. Because emotions do talk to us. Emotions are trying to tell us something. Irritation and anger, especially. But we're taught to stuff them down. We're taught to, especially if you occupy the space of a woman or a feminine society, right? Are seen as somehow not as quote unquote strong because you have emotions, right? There's a way that we then deny ourselves what ourselves are trying to say. And right now, those emotions are going to come up and they need to come out and play. Right. And when you allow that to happen, there is a way that your body can start to trust you again. Because how many of you how many of you can say your body believes you? Believes you when you say you'll do something for you. Okay. Right now, trust, faith, and authority are loud. They've been loud really since Neptune and Aries and went into Aries and Saturn went into Aries. We have got to figure out what it means to not only own our own heads, but be able to hold that head once it is owned so that it is not taken once again. Okay, so this is where you have to have a relationship with your own knowing, and your emotions are the ways in which you can enter into that relationship. Okay, so don't run away from them. Let them tell you truth. And when you bring truth to the table, you bring vulnerability. When you bring vulnerability to the table, right, you bring change. When you bring change to the table, right, shit's going to change. Something is going to be different. So when all those things are at the table, but we are told to not engage with those kind of aspects of life, and we are told just to conform to the script that society told us, just keep going in the same way, in the same form, in the same function, but no longer do those forms and functions even exist because the state has collapsed, right? It is now time to meet yourself. It is now time to meet yourself. I have Lilith conjunct my ascendant and Uranus in Scorpio, right? And I talked about this before. And so my ascendant in Scorpio conjunct Lilith and Uranus is also trine my Mars, which is my chart ruler in the ninth house of Cancer, right? There is a way I have learned over the years that my questions and natural curiosity truly disturb people and institutions, very much so. And for a very long time, I told myself that I was the problem. I was too much. Don't do so much, Nicole. Sit in the sides, sit at the margins, right? Build in the corners, build in the crevices. And that didn't work either. No matter where place I tried to build, no matter what place I tried to create, I was always going to be a problem. Right? What I considered even an innocent or basic question or line of inquiry has led to some volatile interactions with professors, teachers, preachers, publishers, institutions, and the like, and all those the industries that are housed in those kind of locations. And so when I started to get into astrology, and really and examine it, really learn it as a discipline and put it alongside my disciplinary training as an anthropologist, It helped me understand that when you do ask questions in a structure that needs you to conform, that that is what is needed to bring change. So if Uranus is and Lilith are on my ascendant, then I carry the energy of change. And so that means that I have to understand that I carry the energy of destruction, right? And this is what this energy is talking about. I'm talking about me as an example, y'all, because since Lilith is in Scorpio right now, everyone is getting a chance to feel this energy of change and destruction. And it doesn't always feel good. It doesn't always feel grounded. You can sometimes feel like you are a problem, but what happens if you are the problem? But there's already a problem to begin with, so two problems coming together, right? Hopefully it's going to be the different solution. So as you are engaging with these energies and you start to feel as if you are a problem, if you start to feel as if you are too much, if you start to feel as if the emotions are going to overtake you, I mean this with a lot of love. Keep going. Keep fucking going. Because ain't a goddamn thing going on right now that actually needs to be maintained. Okay? This is not going to be easy. It's not going to be pretty. I'm not going to sit here and give you a love and light kind of of reading, but I'm also not going to give you a doom and gloom. We have a choice. We have a choice. And Lilith and Scorpio is reminding us that that choice means we have got to go into the depths of the things that we have been told to shy away from in us and bring them out. The monsters, y'all. How do you defeat a monster? You meet it with another. And I really do mean that as well. But what that monster looks like has to be grounded also in who your human is and where your God lies within you. So gods, humans, and monsters are knocking at the door. Which one is coming out for you? Which one is leading you? And which one is protecting you? Okay. Now, on the 30th, Uranus is in an opposition to the moon in Sag. Okay, so again, this ongoing conversation, a lot of squares and oppositions this week. Those are not bad at all. Tension is needed for change. So, what about your belief systems need a bit of a change? All right, Uranus, Gemini. Moon Sag. This is the axis of the teacher and student, of philosophy and facts, right? Of the ephemeral and the mundane. So, what about your belief system needs a bit of a change, a shakeup? How grounded is your knowledge, right? There's a class of intelligence, there's a clash, excuse me, of intelligence happening right now. And we're seeing it all over these internet streets and also in the seat of power. And so Uranus is showing us just how disconnected many of us have been from our knowing, because these facts ain't facting. These figures ain't figuring, right? So now that the moon is kind of moving through the sign of the zodiacs, that is getting us to kind of get more philosophical, to go into the depths and then go into the ephemeral, right? What do you believe in and why? And how is that grounded in so-called facts? And if those facts again are in a state of flux and change, because we have literally seen again in the US, we've got them trying to remove history once again, rewrite it in real time, as if there has not been a whole ass kind of plethora of information that was poured out into the public since the 2000s. But as the information got poured out, so did the ability for us to be able to discern that information get rolled back. So there was a kind of an information dump to overwhelm, which is again a strategy when you want to keep a population sick and ignorant. So now that we can see in real time that these so-called facts, these so-called figures, again, aren't making any sense, then what is it about us that needs to change in our belief systems? Okay, so again, your emotions are going to be at the table, y'all, this week. Please work with them, track with them. And if you do, let me know. I would love to hear in the comments how these kind of practices work for you. And again, if you want to kind of get more guidance and work with others who are doing this, please join the Patreon, because there I do talk about ritual more and work with folks to help not only do the rituals, but also interpret what happens after them. Okay. Now, On the first of the month. First, it is my other roommate Forrest's birthday. So I just want to say an early happy birthday to Forrest for September 1st. And again, then the 25th was my other roommate Sean's birthday. So I'm going to do another shout out to Sean. Happy birthday as well. And Sean is actually the one, real quick, who colored my hair this last time for my birthday. And he did a bomb ass job. So also want to shout out. It's amazing living in a house with two artists as well. And side note, y'all, me moving into this house with two other folks, and we all have birthdays within 2 weeks of each other. So I'm the Leo, and I got two Virgos, and we all queer as shit. Has been a really big space of healing for me. It's been a really big space of healing. And Pluto's in my fourth house right now, transiting in Aquarius, and will be there for the next 18 years. And when Pluto first made its way into Aquarius in late January, I felt that shit, y'all. I really do mean that. I felt that. Like it was like a boom in my kind of body that the space and home that I was renting from my sister was not actually home for me. And I needed to make some big changes because I was living a kind of pattern that I had been in since I was a kid. I didn't plan on coming back to Chicago. I didn't really necessarily want to. This was not necessarily a city that I had fond memories in. But then I had to when again my life broke and because I broke it, divorce and all the like, right? I needed to come home, but I didn't really know what home was. And that was something that I was really grappling with for a long time. What is home? I had been moving around so much for my career and for my education that once I stopped running and had to face myself, therefore face my past, I literally had to come home again. And in coming home to a place that I've been born, I realized that maybe my family, birth family, blood family was not a place that I could call home. And that was also breaking me. And so when the Pluto went into Aquarius and I came over to the house that I'm now living in because I was making music with Forrest, we were about to record. And I think I told the story before. We were about to record one of our songs, and he looked at me and he said, "Fam, are you okay?" Because my energy was a bit off. I was trying to like push through, and I just looked at him and I started crying. And it felt like every time I came over to do music, I was crying. And I was quite frankly very embarrassed because I was like, this is usually not my normal MO, right? But in that moment, Forrest said, well, when you're comfortable, when you actually feel safe, you can express yourself. So I get it, fam. Why are you doing this on your own? I told you I need a roommate. Come move here. And like I said before, when I told this story, it was a lot of ego that I had to kind of face in myself that I didn't realize was there. I didn't realize was there, right? Because that, yeah, Leo's son, but also eldest daughter, eldest daughter, gay, of two parents who are silent generation, bitch. Come on now. The idea of even asking for help, even when I wanted to, even when I thought I was asking for help, wasn't there. So I had a reality check. Pluto was taking me to the underworld and telling me and asking me to face the reality that if I did not ask for help, I was going to die. I was going to drown. Like literally, I was drowning, right? So there was a flip with that. There was a reckoning that I had to have with what it means to come home by reassessing what home meant for me. And fucking age or not, I was single mom who came out later in life and I needed community, right? This stuff is not easy. And so now living in a house, in a home really, that I know I'm cared for, that I can openly care for others. And I know it's not an extraction in either way. It's an exchange. It does not mean it's been all sunshine and roses. We've had to work through conflict because we all grown as shit. We all grown ass folks trying to figure out how to navigate not only living together, but also trying to reassess the next phases of our lives. But I'm grateful for it because conflict is not always negative, y'all. And this is what I'm saying back to these squares and these oppositions that are going on in the sky right now. Sometimes you need conflict in order to reveal what has been hidden, or what has been or what has been not looked at because you don't want to look at it, so that you can work through something different. And if we hadn't worked through the various conflicts we had, we wouldn't be able to truly see each other. And now I can honestly say I see their humanity in all capacity, and I know that mine is seen as well. And that is how you create community, because that's how you create trust and loyalty, because you got to be fucking vulnerable, right? So I'm saying all this to say, when we're talking about these ideas of belief systems, right, and what we are, how do I say this, y'all? When we're talking about this idea of belief systems, and we're talking about, having to face the kind of taboo things, having to rewrite our stories, having to ask ourselves what we would go to battle for, what do we love and why, right? This is not an individual act. We still need other people. We still need other people, because we're human. And Saturn is going to remind us of that. Because on the 1st, not only, again, is it my other roommate's birthday, it's also when Saturn makes her way back into Pisces. So Saturn's been retrograde for a while in Aries, and now she goes back into Pisces at 29 degrees. And so she'll be in Pisces till the end of the year, and then make its way back into Aries by next year. So will Neptune, okay? Now, as Saturn makes her way back into Pisces, we have the moon at 25 degrees in Sag, making a trine to Chiron in Aries and Mercury in Leo. So this is about us having to reassess the collective. Okay, the collectives we're a part of. This is what I'm talking about, moving in and having to reassess what home was. Because the old mother makes her way back into the deep waters. Remember, for me, Saturn is the crone. Saturn has gotten washed in the deep waters of Pisces for the last 2 years, allowing herself to be cleansed, right? And reemerge as the great mother once again, coming out of the patriarchal hold that has been put around this idea of time and reality and authority and responsibility that doesn't really make any sense. And so now we are being asked to look at faith and spirit once again. It's in a review. So where does yours lie? There's a collective responsibility in claiming our authority. So this is also about who we commune with and why. What beliefs do we hold on to that our communities and collectives are rooted in? Right? And who is leading them? Do these so-called authority figures, whether they be political, spiritual, familial, do they actually live up to what they said they would do? Neptune will join Saturn in Pisces on October 22nd and will be there until late January of 2026, before going back into Aries and staying. So this really is a time in which we are reviewing and understanding that we have got to own our own stories, the stories we tell ourselves about who we are as a collective. So opposite Virgo, because remember, Pisces and Virgo are oppositions. Opposite Virgo, where the Sun and South Node are, and we just had the first of 2 new moons. What have we learned over the past 2.5 years about waiting in delusion and not believing ourselves, right? What has relying on logics that kept us chasing futures that never became present done to our health, individually and collectively? How has service, the concept of service, been warped into subjugation? That is what Saturn is really going to have us be reviewing, okay? Because there is, again, this is about faith. This is about faith and spirit and spirituality. Because again, the colonial project is spiritual warfare first and foremost. I've always taught this. That is why when they took the enslaved from the shores of West Africa, many times they had to walk around a tree as a way to signal them disconnecting from their ancestors, their spirituality, their sense of self. You have to disconnect a human from its spirit in order to try to subjugate it in one way, shape, or form, because no living being, no living entity is here to be subjugated. That makes absolutely no logical sense. Okay, so it's also interesting because Saturn will go retrograde into Pisces on Labor Day in the United States, right? And that's really fitting because our bodies are the main sources of labor that has been used and commodified in these racial capitalist streets. And so as Saturn has us reflect and review authority, time, responsibility, and the like, right? The traditions that we hold on to and why. On the day of labor, in which people, working class folks, had to fight for the ability to have rest. Because before Labor Day happened, before the kind of organizing around unions, right, came, people were working 7 days a week, sun up to sundown. It was just another location of the plantation economy. Right? We do not have a good history in this United States or in these Western projects of understanding a value of labor, because it is seen as something that can be extracted from and taken. And the main source of labor, again, being the body, means these structures and systems have us buying into the idea that we can just take from ourselves and one another, that somehow these vessels aren't finite in nature. We have become the new machines in the cog. So what does it look like for us to then review those stories and who we give our authority up to? Because where does our faith lie? Because our faith systems actually help shape the ways in which we show up in the mundane. So if your faith is based on you finding glory once you die, well, then when you are on earth, of course you will beat the shit out of your body. Who does that serve and why? Reflect and review and then do something new. Okay? Now, on the 2nd, Mercury makes its way into Virgo, going into the sign that it both likes to be in and is also exalted in. Now, once this happens, it's going to square Uranus and Gemini. So just like planets coming into Leo are going to, just like planets going into Leo will be opposing Pluto, planets going into Cancer right now will be in a square to Neptune and Saturn. Planets that are going to be going into Virgo right now are going to be in a square to Uranus. So the outer planets are all asking us to go into some type of change. Again, squares and oppositions are places of conflict that can lead and are supposed to lead for transformation. Okay, so when Mercury goes into Virgo, it's going to square Uranus and Gemini, and the moon ends up in Capricorn. And we're going to have Jupiter in Cancer in a square to Mars in Libra, okay? So what does this mean? So again, Mercury being in the sign that it likes to be in, the messenger planet can now really move. So don't be surprised if your body starts to get loud with you, okay? This is why once you've been tracking your body for a while. Once that South Node in Virgo, once that South Node went into Virgo, I saw it as being very similar to when the North Node was in Taurus. A lot of folks reported the body, food issues, having to revamp what they even put in their body, a lot of purging. In Virgo, stomach stuff, I've had a lot of clients, myself included, in which there's been a lot of releasing, literally, bathroom-wise, burping-wise, sweating-wise. Like there's a purging, a releasing of the body to make space for something new, and also for you to hear yourself, because once you get rid of literally all the shit that is kind of putting a veil over the self, all right? So because of this, I also want to point out that I think there's going to be some stuff coming about in healthcare. It's going to be shaken up. And also when it comes to the family. So healthcare and family structures and systems. I don't necessarily do mundane astrology, but because of the patterns and the ways in which these astrological transits are going, I think we're going to have some more stuff coming out around family planning. So I wouldn't be surprised if we have more state interventions or trying to make some interventions in the makeup of the family and how it's constituted, and the ideas of gender and sex being forced once again back into this binary. As we also see more of a rise of people trying to discipline their body to make it smaller, right, with these various drugs. So all of these things are coming into a head. And we have to remember something, y'all. The first institution that grooms and shapes us is the family. So it would make sense that the state, an authoritarian state, would try to control the makeup of the family, because that then becomes a location that you can then also be groomed into society through. So with all of these kind of squares and the focus on both Virgo, the body, and Pisces, the collective, and also Jupiter being in Cancer, expanding for the next few months, like I said, for a full year, those Cancerian themes, and in the square to Mars in Libra, right, there's a way that I can see I can see there's an expansion, right? There's an abundance, but there's also a focus on trying to manipulate the makeup of that, okay? So this is why it is important, right, to be loyal to your knowing. Moon will be in Capricorn at this time, and Capricorn is a sign of loyalty. And again, it's an earth sign, and it can be stubborn as well, even though it's a cardinal sign. But that stubbornness can be used to your benefit, because you got to be loyal to your knowing, which means you got to be loyal to your body. It is a form of resistance so that we don't become docile and bend the knee once again to a bully, right? Once something is out, it is hard to put it back in a box. And for the past 50 years, there has been a lot of people, a lot of things coming out, right? The margins be trying to be centered and really pushing society into quote unquote more progressive ways of being. And again, like I said last week, there will always be backlash, but the cat's out the bag. We already know it's here. So it's hard to put something back in a box unless that history is purposefully erased so that the collective memory is altered. That is what the state is trying to do now. We are seeing it with the museums and with the retelling of the kind of origin story, once again, of this nation. So this is why your body matters so much right now, y'all. What do you know to be true for you and about you? Because embodiment is memory. It's a memory restorer and connector to times before in so many ways. So this is not some love and light thing of saying, oh, talk to your body. No, when power and authority try to remove you from history by removing your people's place in that historical record, even as it is your people who built that goddamn state to begin with in one way, shape, or form, right? Then the only way you can resist that erasure is by coming into the body and invoking that memory up from the body, okay? Virgo, Pisces, what do we must let go of? What must we let go of the body? What must we be able to purge from it so that we can come into the spirit, all right? Next week, we have eclipse season starting with the Pisces lunar eclipse and then that in a full moon, along with Uranus going retrograde. So all the outer planets will be retrograde starting next week. So we are having to truly come to terms with our collective choices, meaning the dead are also in this conversation. So I'm going to talk about that next week. So join me then, all right? And as always, if you want to listen to the full podcast, please join my Patreon. That is where you'll get both the weekly forecast breakdown along with my astrology 101 / storytime and my analysis, what I call yapping with the stars, okay? And if you want to book a one-on-one reading with me, you can do so on my website, drnicolerouse.com. Use code BIRTHDAY for $44 off any astrology reading with me, but you need to book by the end of this month in order to have that code apply, all right? And I do have a new reading up, 30 minutes, called the Clarity Reading. You ask a question, and we go to the cosmos through your chart to see what the clarity answer could be. All right, y'all, so keep dreaming, keep exploring, because it's through the dreamscape that we can bring those futures that we want to bring into the present. Till next time. I don't want to be right. I just want to be free. Like Michelle sang. The cosmos, where we come from. The light that lit the way for our ancestors in the dark of night, when they had to leave the spaces that tried to steal their breath and life. Reworking, while also learning how to work with the land that was also being worked. A land and people under duress. The trees did not ask if they wanted to participate in such brutal practices. Yet here they were. Here we are. All beholden to a power structure that only knows how to take and never to give, while telling us this is the right way to live. So I don't want to be right. I just want to be free. As Michelle sang. Lord imagined that freedom lied in parable of the sower that sowed the seeds of earth seed that wanted to bring humans back to the stars, to start again, to start anew. Remember where we come from and who we are. The stars that lit the way, that guide the light. The moon that holds the tides of the waters. Our connection to earth and land. As above, so below. Yet we don't know, because we have lost the above and the below. So I don't want to be right. I just want to be free and journey to the cosmos.